Welcome to the Vision Profiles podcast. Join us, two dedicated Apple Vision Pro users, and I think we have a third one here with us tonight, as we dive into everything from hardware and software to apps and the latest updates in the world of Apple Vision Pro. I'm Marty Gencius, a faculty member at Kent State, also a podcaster and an avid Apple product fan.
And I'm Eric Bolden. I work in IT, but my interest is in finding interesting ways to share content. Currently, photography of plants, birds, and panoramic sequences.
And with us today, we have Nelson Taruc. Is that right?
Yep, that's great.
Okay. Nelson, thanks for joining us. We've had some conversation and some information back and forth, and it sounds like you're pretty much heavy into this environment and into this Vision Pro experience. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get to know more about you later on in the episode.
Sure. Yeah. So first off, thanks for having me on. My name is Nelson. It's actually Taruc, but the way you pronounced it was fine too. I'm based out of Chicago, and I'm a design lead at a company called Lextech. And the company works closely with some of Apple's customers in the enterprise, and it's really focused on improving employee experiences through technology. So, groups that have like a lot of iPads or Apple Vision Pros deployed, in the enterprise, we sort of help them improve employee experiences. So, in a wide range of fields. Retail, manufacturing, life sciences, and aviation. And so ever since the announcement of the Apple Vision Pro last June at DubDub, the company and me have been really focused on designing and developing those experiences for employees.
Yeah. Very cool. And we're going to hear more about sort of your work and the kinds of things that you're developing. I didn't know you were based out of Chicago.
Yes, based out of Chicago. Our company is actually remote and distributed. So, we have folks that work, all over the United States, and we meet remotely. And one of the great advantages of Apple Vision Pro is to be able to have those, FaceTime conversations where we have all our meetings now spatially. And it's really cool to, connect with folks that way.
Well, I'm a Chicago native. Maybe you can tell from the T-shirt that says Cleveland Blue, a 3-1 lead. And I'm living near Cleveland, so I can only wear this inside unless I get,
yes, that's a great shirt.
Eric and I are going back to Chicago area this weekend for MacStock, the MacStock Conference and Expo. If you want to know more about that, you can look it up on the web. And there's all sorts of great talks and things going on there. But I get back to Chicago to see a couple of Cubs games every year. And I have a sister who lives there, so they're relatives. So Chicago is really my first home.
Cool.
But glad to have a fellow greater Chicago area person. And Eric's somewhere in Wisconsin?
Yes.
Yeah.
So not too far away.
Yeah, in an undisclosed space in Wisconsin where he has bad storms all the time, he tells me.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
But nice cherry trees. So there are pluses.
So we're going to cover some of the news, and we're going to feature a discussion later about some of Nelson's work and, particularly how he's using the Apple Vision Pro headset. So last week we had tons of news articles. This week we have less news articles, but some interesting stuff. Just today, the developer version of Vision OS 2.0 Beta 3 was released. And, that came across my feed at around 3:30, just about 4 or 5 hours ago. So I haven't been able to load it on there, but I've been trying to read about it. And sometimes you get, Mac Rumors always puts an article out about it. And if you read every Mac Rumors release about a beta, they're all the same. The format is, this is all the stuff that's going to come to the new version of the software. They don't say, but it's not on the beta yet. And then they go at the end of it, we really don't know what's on the beta yet. So they reintroduce everything that's going to happen eventually with Vision 2.0. And then they give you kind of this nothing burger of an article. You kind of have to go to release notes to wade through some of that to find out something interesting of what's going on with this particular release. And I don't know if either of you saw anything that stood out.
It updated. It didn't seem to break anything.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Well,
it
that's
seems
good news.
it seems to be pretty stable. I've been using it for the past couple hours myself. So
The one thing
so
that
far, so
I
good.
heard, I saw on Reddit was somebody said you now have the option to switch, when you have the crown and you have the default is the environment versus the volume. I really
Yes.
always want to go to the volume. And now they have it set up supposedly so you can default to the volume if you want
Oh,
to increase or decrease volume. Haven't checked it out, but that's what I read. Someone said they had figured out on a Reddit post on this new developer Vision OS 2 beta 3 release.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess I've kept it as environment because now it's really easy to just reach up and pinch and drag the volume up and down. So I find I don't miss not having that in the crown.
Sometimes when my eyesight isn't, is kind of funky, like I have a really big screen, I have to look up to the upper right to get it. Sometimes that doesn't connect. It might be just easier to do the volume on it. Or if my wife says, can you turn that damn thing down? Because she can hear it coming out of the headset. There's another article that was on 9 to 5 Mac. That actually was a pretty good article in terms of talking about the different things that can happen with gestures. And, we've heard about how the AirPods earpods are going to have gestures so you can nod and shake your head to generate responses. Well, apparently they're going to do that similar kind of technology, or the rumor is from 9 to 5 Mac, based on a patent that Apple put in that we could get head gestures in the future.
I guess that makes sense.
yeah. From a user experience standpoint, it's kind of cool, and to see those possibilities for future, ways to interact with Apple Vision Pro, even if it doesn't see the light of day. It's a pretty exciting, way to think about, all the different things that you could do experientially. And head gestures may make sense. I could see times where you might do it accidentally, though, and accidentally trigger something. So that's my only hesitation.
That's a good thought. I think, for me, I read the article and think this is Apple's attempt to do everything they can to avoid us from giving us a hand control set, to really fully utilize all of the stuff they have jammed into that thing that the competitors or the so-called competitors don't have. So you might as well use it if they have those kinds of hardware in there to give you the kind of nuances that gestures can do. But there's new code names for next year's OS updates. Buried in here, you find that Apple's already working on Vision OS 3, or at least they've named it. And according to the article, that was in Macworld, the OS 3 is going to be called Vision OS 3 is going to be called Discovery, which I don't know. Seems kind of weird. But you look at OS 19 and iPad OS, the code name is Luck. Then Mac OS 16 is Cheer. Watch OS 12 is Nepali. So I don't know if there's a naming convention like hurricanes here. But like, are we going to be named after space shuttles in terms of Vision OS? Trying to work that out. tvOS is missing from the list. tvOS 19 is missing from the list. But that's just you can start throwing that around and impressing your friends. Yeah, we hear about Vision OS 2, but what about Discovery? And what will Discovery bring us? Funny article, I think. The Right to Repair article that is in, again, 9 to 5 Mac. And they're talking about the necessity of it being available and being available in terms of Vision OS or Apple Vision Pro. I don't want to, I put it down carefully, let alone thinking I'm going to crack this thing open and try and repair it. I just think it's funny. There people want to have the right to repair something and think they have the ability to repair something that challenging in terms of the hardware that's involved in it.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody repairs those now. It's like a swap out for a new one, or it gets sent into one specific spot. I don't think any anyone repairs them locally. So I'm not sure it really even applies to this whole right to repair thing. It was good news on the phone that there's a lot of information out there and there are ways to do it. But I think if local shops can't repair something, it doesn't apply to the right to repair.
Yeah.
So, it was an interesting article, but the grades are meaningless.
Yeah.
It was neat to hear about the iPhone 15.
Yeah. And the kinds of things they can do with that. So we'll have all of these article links posted in the show notes. So for listeners, you can check the show notes in the actual podcast and podcast file, and you'll be able to link out to these articles as we talk about them.
And don't break your Vision Pro and have Apple Care.
Yeah. And I have all sorts of questions like, so what does this do to the warranty? Obviously, if you take it to a third party person that's going to try and fix it because, your uncle's good with a screwdriver, that must mess the warranty in any Apple Care. If you had Apple Care, you wouldn't want to take it to your uncle with the screwdriver anyways. So Apple Vision Pro will allow alternate payment methods in the EU. No big surprise there. That's an Engadget article that says, basically the EU is having its impact also in payment methods with Vision Pro. And it has to do with the DMA rules and all of that ability for people to use alternate payment methods. Some general interest articles, Apple Vision. This I thought was a pretty good article in terms, it's an opinion article, and it was in Macworld. What Apple Vision Pro really means for Mac users. And, we because we're on top of this, we hear the ins and outs, and there were a lot of articles this week on reviews from the release in other countries that occurred this week. So you see those pop up in the news feeds, and they had the same concerns that have been repeated in when it first was released here in the US and even past then. And so I didn't put a lot of those into the feed to talk about tonight. They're out there. You can see them. But this article in particular, I think, has taken that information and those concerns and kind of said, here are some ways that could be next steps. And think of it within the context of what else is what other products Apple has rolled out.
Yeah, I think it was well done, kind of base article. I haven't started to see Apple Vision Pro articles yet on how to be more productive with the Apple Vision Pro or my daily life with Apple. It's not quite mature enough for that yet, I don't think. People definitely have opinions, and people who use it a lot or use it for work have some opinions. So I'm hoping to start seeing more articles where you get, this is the group of software I use every single day. And that article kind of is an early state, which will have follow-ups with more information, I think. But worth reading.
Nelson, any reaction?
So, the interesting thing about the article, or just some of these articles in general, is that I can sometimes tell how much they've actually used the Apple Vision Pro, based on some of the stuff that they write. And, for me personally, I'm using this, and we'll talk more about this later, I'm sure, but I'm in this device, 5 days a week, at least 4 hours a day. It is part of my work routine. And so I definitely have a different view of things, just based on my personal experience. Obviously, there's some things you cannot do. You cannot code. You can't use Xcode. There's some design tools that you can't really use well also in Apple Vision Pro. But for mostly everything else, I reach out to, to Apple Vision Pro. And so I think there's going to be a lot of different viewpoints in how people view the Mac and, how we could relate or interact with the Apple Vision Pro in terms of how you work in a productive setting. So that's why this podcast is great, to be honest, to get those different alternative viewpoints on how to, on articles like this and being able to talk about them.
Nelson, knowing the kind of work that you do, I think you're an example of what Eric's asking for. Someone who uses it from a productivity standpoint. You're working in development and also connecting with enterprise people around it. And so you're really kind of talking about that segment of productivity. And I think that's really great. So we'll get to that. And I want to hear more about it.
If someone from Macworld is listening, just give me a shout out. I'll write something for you.
So he's on this podcast and he's always already mooching out to Macworld. Come on.
I know. Sorry, I had to go for it since you brought it up.
This was a clickbait for me. This next article was a clickbait in terms of Apple Vision, the Apple Vision Pro accessory you shouldn't overlook. It's like, I purchased every Apple Vision Pro accessory. It's, what is it this guy's going to tell me about it? And it comes down to having a good VPN. I'm curious about your reaction to this.
Yeah, I mean, VPNs make common sense, especially in the enterprise and for folks. And if you're in the enterprise, all your devices, not just your Apple Vision Pro, should be on a VPN. So it was kind of clickbaity, the title. So,
are you running a VPN, Eric? Yeah.
Yeah, you can't get anywhere without a VPN.
Okay. Well,
and in most cases, an organization will tell you which VPN you're using as well.
Yep.
So the article listed a whole pile of them, and don't use one that just says it looks neat. Generally start with the recommended one from your organization and go from there.
Yeah, I don't have those kind of restrictions where I work. I'm sure they don't want us. They get rather touchy about what we can do, but they don't put us under VPN. But I'm sure we have firewalls and things like that to prevent people from getting in. But I clicked on that article because I wanted to find out. Now, okay, it's VPN. Now, which ones does he recommend? And sure enough, I've used 2 of the 3 that were in the list. So you can take a look at that article again through the show notes and see what you think about using a VPN or making sure you have a VPN on your system. What to expect from Apple's next headset. This is an Apple Insider article. Interesting ideas. It talks about different pathways, like, are we going to see 2 different Apple Vision headsets? And goes back, if you go through the article, it'll be a good review of the type of news things that have come up over the last 6 months about Apple Vision and what's going to happen next. So things like having 2 kinds of headsets, and they point to some information about code names N602, having 2 variants of the headset, and everybody, of course, talking about making it half the cost. I still don't know if they're going to, if Apple's going to say, yeah, we'll do something that's half as good for half the cost. I'm not right away until the stuff that we have now becomes baseline and cheaper, then it becomes half the cost. I just don't see it, but they're talking about rumors that are associated with that, different kinds of things in terms of sensors and Apple chips. Maybe instead of having 2, have 1. They said it could even run on an A18 for most of what it does. So who knows? This one I thought was just an interesting article. I don't know your takes on it, if you have anything to share.
Yeah, so I have no idea what the future holds for the next product.
That's why we invited you on, Nelson. You're going to predict the future.
But I think it's safe to say that, like, I don't know Apple ever having compromised on hardware user experience to make money for a quick dollar. So when I hear reports about lower quality optics and sensors, I sort of think, like, really, like, they're like, Apple's going to do a quick money grab. It doesn't feel like it would be in their DNA when they really focus on a really great, user experience, putting together hardware and software. You look at the iPhone, for instance, the 2nd and 3rd gen iPhones were not cheaper and less capable. They went bigger and more capable. And my gut says that I can't, for a launch product like this, like, why they wouldn't go that way. Obviously, they might be able to, do some, cost savings or economy things to make it more affordable. The other way they could do it is add more functionality or add a second device to the ecosystem or a second accessory that makes Apple Vision Pro even more, a great tool for computing.
They talk about the LCD panels, and we covered an article last week about how Apple was in conversations with a company that had produced smaller LCDs, but with a different kind of process on it that would give it just as good or better resolution. And it's interesting, where they might be able to kind of shift with the technology and also impact the cost at the same time. So but I don't see Apple creating a Apple Vision with training wheels on it. It's, they're not going to step it down. They're going to step it up. Weight was another issue where people in this article had some ideas about, neck fatigue and how to deal with neck fatigue. You have it on for sometimes 4 hours a day.
Mhm.
And what is that like for you?
Oh, it's fine. It's not an issue. I think one of the big things you need to do, especially if you're a new user, is to really just find out the best comfort for you. And so I use the Solo strap, and I actually wear a baseball cap backwards. And so this is like my little trick, that I use the baseball cap as part of the balancing mechanism, and I just figure out a way where it doesn't, it's not heavy, but based on what you had said in previous podcasts, there's definitely probably a focus on making it even lighter and more easier to wear for longer periods of time. I'm sure that's something that they're looking at.
Yeah, that makes sense. And figuring, processors will always get smaller and produce a little less heat. That might be a way of reducing some weight as well.
So let's talk about. Yeah, go ahead.
Just real quick, one thing I wanted to add was that, so my boss, he's like the CEO and chief geek. That's like his title. So Alex Bratton, he says that this is the worst version of Apple Vision Pro that you'll ever see. So it's only going to get better from here, just like the iPhone. And really excited to see that. I don't know if going cheaper and less of a user experience is Apple's way, just personally.
Very true.
To think that what I'm wearing on my head is the worst version of a product. Wow.
So,
and I
like,
get it. I believe you that that's a part of the process, and we've seen it in other product lines too.
Mm-hmm.
From everything that Apple does, goes from the kind of the worst to the better to the best to the
and that's why we're really we're really excited, to work on enterprise applications, because we know the potential for this. It's pretty wild.
Just a couple more articles. One is I put under competitors, and it's the Meta Quest. I hate calling Meta Quest a competitor, and the press keeps this fantasy going, and I guess I am too by calling it a competitor. Meta, I own one. I own a Meta 3. I've owned a 2 and a 1. Completely different device for completely different purposes. Gaming, things like that. Apple is a computing system. So when you start to have articles that are like, well, Meta's doing this and Apple's now doing this and blah, 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 they're just doing it. It's not a competition in that sense, considering they're two different really platforms. But the article that came out and was around is part of Apple Insider, but I've seen it in other sources. This week was, it was 9 to 5 Mac, but I've seen it in other sources too, is that Meta is now going to be doing multiple windows, and you could get it up to 6 windows. And so I read the article. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But knowing what's on Meta, what would I need to have 6 windows open of? And because I'm interested in doing it for a little bit of mainly entertainment, and I can't watch 6 movies at the same time. But productivity too. I go in there and I do some light productivity work. So, so I'm reading the article. I think it's pretty funny. And if you go down to the comments, it's like somebody wrote 6 windows. What could you do with? There's nothing you can do. What does Meta have to put into 6 windows? So. Interesting that they're trying to boost up this false equivalency between the two headsets.
Yeah, Marty, I agree with you 100%. I think this whole Meta Quest versus Apple Vision Pro, it is a trap for many people, especially after launch. I noticed it a lot after launch, because people, when they see the headset and it looks like another headset, they think it's an AR VR headset. And the thing that I've learned, personally, over the past couple of months, is that AR and VR and all those letter R's, those are just functions of the Apple Vision Pro. Like, this is not a headset. This is a computing device, and it has AR, VR functionality, sure, but it is also so much more than that. And to compare MetaQuest, which feels more like a gaming device, and to equate it to something that is a bit more powerful, to be honest. I know there are going to be differing opinions on that, but yeah, the comparison really isn't there in my view either. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. And I think, Eric, do you have any ideas about this?
I think it's good for the MetaQuest to exist.
Absolutely.
And they bring up issues and ways of trying to do things and questions. And there's some people that want to do something that the Vision Pro isn't good at with, certain game functions or running around in a room or risking your hardware where you might have to replace it. It's perfect for that. And I'm more than happy to have an alternative for people that, want to run around with the device and be able to replace it. But yeah, it's not the same device.
Yeah,
I
Marty,
see
the other
this.
thing that, oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead, Nelson.
The other thing that I've seen that is very, the way I think about it is that the real competition for Apple Vision Pro, at least in the enterprise and, talking to IT managers who buy things a lot, the competition is not, hey, am I going to buy MetaQuest versus Apple Vision Pro? The question they have is like, am I going to buy this workforce, on 100 new laptops? Or what percentage of these people don't need a laptop, but they could use an iPad and Apple Vision Pro or Apple Vision Pro and something else? And so I think the real competition that folks should worry about are the Dells and the HPs and whoever makes a business desktop or laptop today. That's the real competition right now, at least from where I stand.
Yeah.
Eric uses his, as a portable computing device. I do mine on the couch, but Eric actually takes his out to work and uses it for those kinds of purposes. So
portable secure screens.
Yeah.
Exactly. The secure part is a big deal too in the enterprise for sure.
I think this argument between MetaQuest and Vision Pro, it seems like it's always coming from MetaQuest. I mean, Apple doesn't talk bad about people in a way around this. I think a lot of this is Mark Zuckerberg really trying to push his product in a way. So you start a lot of these false comparisons in order to generate attention when it's really two different devices and complete devices. But it's not Apple saying, oh, we're so much better, or look at all the cool things we can do. They say that, but they don't say it in reference to what MetaQuest can't do. And that, they don't talk about the cheapness of that other device. So it always seems to be one direction in terms of that argument. Final article, and then we'll find out a little bit more about Nelson, is something I bring up because one of our past guests was involved in this, and it was a hackathon, a Vision Hack hackathon. And it is an attempt to get developers to produce app and games for the Apple Vision Pro. It takes place between September 13th and September 15th. And the event intends to have developers working together to create new apps. And we had with us one of the folks who are putting this together, Cosmos Sharf, as a guest on one of our earlier shows. And he comes up with some really cool and interesting things. But the idea of doing this kind of collective app development, a registration fee is $25. It's open to individuals or teams up to five people. You're probably closer to this idea than I ever will be, Nelson. Thoughts about this thing?
Yeah. So, one of our spatial computing leads at Lextech actually participated in the first Apple Vision Pro Dev Camp. That was on Santa Clara earlier this year, John Haney, and the creativity and all the new ideas that came out of that. It was really exciting to see the potential that spatial computing has, and I think this upcoming hackathon is a great example of that community building and getting more people involved with Apple Vision Pro development. So really excited about it. We're not sure if our company is going to participate, but I'm sure that some people of us are really interested in the hackathon for sure.
Cool idea. I'm glad to have had Cosmo on here at one point, and maybe I'll try and get him back on post hackathon to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, see how it all goes. That'll be good.
Yeah. So let's find out about Nelson. It's an open forum here for you. You can tell us a little bit about your Vision Pro experience, how you got yours. We've told our origin stories on this podcast before, so we won't won't terrorize you with that. But tell us a little bit about your experience, and then foremost, the kind of work that you're doing with it.
Sure, sure. So to give you a little more background about myself, I'm actually a iOS developer and designer. And so I actually started with a graphic design business before the iPhone launched. And when the iPhone launched, I think within a year, my business turned from like 90% graphic design to 90% iOS, iPhone design and development. And I did a lot of prototyping with companies. So like, large companies that needed a prototype for some executive, demo. That was the kind of work that I did. And I got connected to Lextech, and Lextech has worked with Apple for a long time. And so I did, iPhone, iPad. And when the Apple Vision Pro was announced last June, our company was in a good position to really take advantage of that and start working with our customers on some really exciting proof of concepts and demos and applications. So that's what I've been working on the past year in terms of designing and developing. It's been a lot of Apple Vision Pro stuff, and I would say that we got it through work. Is probably the best way I can say. And I got mine on launch day, and it was a definitely cool experience, because it was the first time I got to I saw it in the simulator for so long. It was great to see it live and in person. And that was really exciting. And it didn't take long to really see the potential. And wow, this is going to be different for computing.
So how are you using the Vision Pro now? And also ideas that you might have for the future?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, originally the Apple Vision Pro, or how we use it every day, is that we're testing applications. We're actually making sure that the user experience is what we've sort of designed and developed, and we're doing multiple applications at once. So it is really cool to like jump from one type of app to another, and really just see all the different possibilities that affords. And with the enterprise APIs that were released at the latest WWDC, we get the ability to, unlock even more functionality for our customers, such as, the ability to use those front-facing cameras, which unlocks a lot of different use cases for the enterprise. And so a lot of that, and, my day-to-day work as well. So email and doing meetings. All my meetings are in Apple Vision Pro. If I get the chance to do it, I use my persona, and that's been great. I really enjoy that as well. So I try to do as much as I can. And the only time I go back to the Mac is if I can't do it on Apple Vision Pro. So that's pretty much my workflow.
So you're developing apps for customers in industry?
Yep.
And those apps will be used to either sell product or develop. We've seen some of those things in, us coding folks have seen these kinds of things where you can put together airplane engines and take them apart. And you can demonstrate, use those for demonstration models. Is that the type of work that customers are asking of you?
Yeah, I can give you an example that's publicly available, and you can actually go to Lextech's website to check it out. It's called Guided Work, and this is basically a platform that helps technicians. So I want you to imagine you're a technician in the field, and you might carry around a laptop, and every day you have to go to different work sites to perform procedures and work on large pieces of industrial equipment. When you're at the site and you need to identify a part, something that we've learned from some of our customers is that this technician has to run all the way back to their truck to sort of figure out what is this part, and then they're on the phone waiting for 30 to 45 minutes to identify what a specific part is. And with Apple Vision Pro, imagine you're replacing the laptop with the Apple Vision Pro. You can do a couple different things. First off, you can actually see in 3D the object that you're going to be working on. And so if you want to preview the work you're going to do for the day, you can pull apart the model. You can go step by step through the procedures that are in guided work, that tells you, okay, for this step, you're going to work on this part. And then it shows you the part. And you can, so if you're a new trainee or if you're new, first time doing this, it's a really great way to speed up and make sure you're not making mistakes on these complicated repairs. And obviously with AI, we have a feature that lets you tap into AI to, ask a question of the manual and get the answers back, or, to do parts identification and get the part number back. And so these are all opportunities, not just on Apple Vision Pro, but on iPad. And that's like a big thing about enterprise design, is that you just don't think about one device. You think about all the devices that the employee is using, and you think through how do you design that for the entire ecosystem. So that's guided work is one example of a use case that we've seen some of our customers really latch onto in terms of the potential there.
So do these types of apps that you're creating for what sounds like specific enterprise use, can they roll over in a way that is purposed for the general public?
In theory, yes, but our company really focuses on the employee experience. And so we found that we give the most valuable to Apple's customers or people that are using iPad and Apple Vision Pro by really building something that's built around the employee, as opposed to like a general purpose thing that's rolled out to the public. And so that's really our sweet spot in terms of developing for the enterprise, really tuning it to the customer. But the platform really is a universal thing that we can roll out to multiple customers, and it works great for that purpose.
So this sounds like a whole different app store. In a sense, the stuff that we see on the Vision Pro, we're not going to necessarily see these apps show up, for particular companies because they're being developed for those particular companies. Am I correct?
Yeah. And, that's one of the interesting things, like when you go on Reddit and you go on other, social media sites and you see the general tenor around the Apple Vision Pro, there's a whole universe that people do not get to see that people don't really talk about. And yeah, I'm really excited to see that work. There's a bunch of use cases in addition to guided work that we're working on, and I could rattle them off, and I don't want to go there, but there's a ton of excitement around that. I can give you some more examples if you're looking for them too.
Eric, I think I cut you off.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so when you get a project and you work on it, how do you present that to a customer, especially if there's an iPad and an Apple Vision component? The Apple Vision is something new, and I'm guessing not everybody who you're explaining it to has an Apple Vision. Do they have to get one so that you can demo it, or how do you go about presenting something like that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things there, and I'll focus on the second part first. I think if you haven't tried Apple Vision Pro, or if you're new to spatial computing, getting a demo, whether it's through Lextech or through some other third party or at demo at the store, I think that is like, once people do that, they're like, oh, I get it now. Like, now I know what I can use it for. And then they can start thinking. And we actually run workshops with folks. Like after they get a demo, they can, we run workshops. Like now that you've experienced it for a little bit, you can start to think about how this could work for some of the folks in your company, at your business. And, what are some of those ideas? And we really help people think through that by putting that employee at the center. Like we never start with like, oh, here's that Apple Vision Pro. How are you going to deploy it to your organization? It always starts with the employee. And the answer might be iPhone, it might be iPad, it might be Apple Vision Pro, it might be all three of those things. And so we really help, customers really think through that process in a way that makes sense for their business.
You shared with us in our show notes a variety of apps, or at least links to these kinds of apps. And I hope it's okay with me from you to be able to post those.
Oh yeah, the list I gave you.
The listeners want to go. Talk a little bit about the grouping and what they'll find when they look in the show notes.
Yeah, sure. So, just going down my list, the first two apps are really for designers. So for UX, user experience design. There's and in full disclosure, Judo is one of our partners. So Judo is a no-code tool that you can mock up iOS and Vision OS interfaces and iPad OS interfaces. You can do it in no code, and then you can transfer it over to an Xcode project. And so you can do rapid prototyping with this, and it goes straight to Swift UI. So there's nothing lost in translation, and it is a great way to do rapid prototyping. It is it's been great for me in the past year to do these rapid mock-ups for our customers, so they don't have to wait weeks or months for what their experience could look like. Figurative is just for folks that Figma is a design tool that a lot of designers use, especially for interface design. And Figurative is native, a Vision OS port of an iPad app. That is a way to get to Figma if you don't want to use Safari. Now, Figma has some limitations on memory limits. And so Figma doesn't really work great on Apple Vision Pro, but figurative is one way you can do it in a more native, standalone app sort of way. And then Freeform is obviously Apple's whiteboard tool, and you can use that spatially with SharePlay. And so if you want to get that SharePlay sharing experience, that's a great tool to demo to folks. And, having that whiteboard is great for collaboration. I'm going to pause here. Marty, did you want me to go through the whole list or just?
No, just give an idea to listeners, particularly developers who might be interested in these kinds of tools that
Okay.
will, there will be links for them to look at in the show notes.
Okay. If you don't mind, could I talk about the other three tools? Because those might be of interest to your audience. So one of the tools that we found to be used a lot is this app called Polycam. And it is great for getting a quick 3D model up for prototyping. For instance, we work, in the retail space, and Polycam is great for like scanning a space so that you can actually put it within an environment and do some cool prototyping stuff with that. Spline is a great 3D mock-up tool. So if you're not into Blender, but you want something more like Figma in terms of being able to design a 3D scene, definitely look into Spline. I personally don't use it. I use Blender more. Because that's just more for what our customers need. But Spline is a great entryway into 3D design that works with Apple Vision Pro. And then, shamelessly, I created my own app called Fontavision. And basically all this app does is it installs certain fonts that I needed so that I could work on keynote presentations and numbers and pages without having the missing fonts issue jumping from Mac to Apple Vision Pro. So that was just something I whipped up myself. Yeah.
It's very cool. I need to start doing keynotes on Apple Vision Pro, playing with the possibility of doing that. You have muscle memory of certain way doing it on a desktop, and it's a learning curve to shift. But that sounds like a very cool app to be able to put in those missing fonts or to avoid having those missing fonts that you want for keynote pages and numbers. So I'll look into that. As our listeners will. So I have a few experiences of my own that I consider wow moments for the Vision Pro. What would you consider yours, or what would you say folks who are new to it should look out for?
Yeah, I think for anyone who just picked up an Apple Vision Pro, I think the one genuine wow moment is that first spatial conversation you have where you are both in 3D space, looking at each other in a conversation. And that's just like, oh, this is the future. Like, I don't know what else, I'm going to use this Apple Vision Pro for, but that experience is definitely cool. And we have as many meetings as possible in Apple Vision Pros, so we can take advantage of that, spatial collaboration for sure. So I think that's like, if you get an Apple Vision Pro, definitely try and find another user to have that first conversation with. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. On top of that, sit down and watch a movie with people in a dark theater with your Vision Pro headsets on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is so weird.
Yeah. And obviously, if you're brand new, I think the obvious first wow moment for most people is that first Apple immersive video, the tight walk one. Like, when you do that, then you'll know what this is about from a entertainment and an immersion standpoint. That's a great experiences there too.
I spoke about this on a previous show, but for me, another wow moment is happening with the 2.0 and being able to take my old pictures and spatialize them.
Yes.
I grew up where photography was black and white. And so I have lots of old childhood black and white photos. And it does such a nice job of making those relatives who have passed on feel really dimensional outside of those flat black and white photos. So that, unfortunately, that won't be in any of the in-store demos for a while. But that was a really good experience doing those.
Yeah,
Eric, Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that is actually an example of how Apple is applying AI, but they don't really tell you like that. There's a machine learning algorithm behind that feature, but it really boils down to, what is the experience for you as the user? And so from a design standpoint, I really like that. They're like, this is not a new AI feature. This is just something that makes your photos better. And I really like how Apple approaches that.
Yeah. And I've seen some chatter on it where people don't like it. They think it's not good. I think it's better than the other apps that I've looked at that do that. It doesn't leave a lot of shadow, doesn't create an outline around the objects to give that dimensionality. But, to each his own. To me, that was a wow moment. I'm curious, Eric, have you tried that yet?
A little bit. There's some things it works really well on. Like if you take a picture of a daisy in a field of green grass, it does a great job of kind of bringing that whole daisy out and it looks realistic. If you have though like a mat of flowering, uh, vines or something that crawls along the ground, it does give it depth, but it doesn't know how to do it well. It's kind of odd. So I tried going through and doing some scenes where I took a picture in the Apple Vision Pro and then a separate one and then had it in software make it 3D just to kind of see. And that has been interesting. Sometimes it's remarkably close. Other times it's a whole different view. One thing I haven't tried yet that I'm kind of curious about is to take some old slide presentations and see if I could get depth in some of the images on slides. It might work. It might be really bad, but it'll at least be different. So I figure I'll give it a shot.
Nelson, is there anything else you'd like to share about your work? I want to make sure with your approval to get the links in and contact information for you or your company. We'll talk about that after the episode, and I'll put it in the show notes. Anything else you want to share about Lextech?
I think the thing that I'd want to add is that, if you're listening right now and you work for a large company and no one really knows what to do with Apple Vision Pro, or if they have some ideas but they haven't really been able to really put it concrete, that is what I really specialize in, is really helping people think through that and really figuring out a pathway to get Apple Vision Pro, into your workforce. Because once you experience this for yourself, you'll never look at a laptop the same way again. You'll be like, well, I could use a laptop, but if I could do it spatially, how does my work improve? How do I become a better employee? How do I become more productive and more efficient? And I think those are all possibilities with Apple Vision Pro when you think of it not just as a consumer tool, but also as, something that you can create and have in your organization for competitive advantage. So that's what I'm really excited to be working on.
Yeah, I want to hope that we'll see more apps that are developed just for the Vision Pro, or at least have components that you can only use on the Vision Pro. I think they did that with Excel. When I'm looking for apps to talk about in the show, I try to favor those that are made for Vision Pro, because I think that's what our listeners want to hear. And if I see that it's on every other platform and it now is on Vision Pro, and you can see that too when you search for apps, whether it's an iPad app or whether it's a Vision Pro app or an iPad app that's been ported over to Vision Pro. I really hope that developers will start to look at the platform and think, this is something unique that can only be done on this platform, that I can either augment this app with or create a new one that does it.
Yeah. And from a development standpoint, one of the really cool, and I call this almost like a secret weapon, is Swift UI. The fact that you can learn a single programming language to build on iPhone, iPad, and now Apple Vision Pro. I think there's a long-term roadmap here to really get those apps that you're talking about, exclusively on the device. So I think it's just a matter of time and getting more people in the headset to experience it for the first time so they can know what to build. And so that's what I hope we could do as a group collectively in the future.
Yeah. In the notes you sent us, you mentioned a couple of apps that were, I really enjoyed. The What If app, for me, when I first used that, it was like, this is not something I've seen before in here. I mean, there's zombie attack, but the zombies are nothing like that. But the What If app, it was like, he's standing in my living room. His feet are on the floor. I mean, there's just so much amazing about that.
So did you notice that?
Oh, I know. Oh, yeah.
I was just going to say, did you notice, like, if you stand up and walk around, like their eyeballs will track you? Like, it's just
I
little
did
moments
that.
like that. They're like, yeah, that's cool, So anyways.
Yeah.
A nice
So yeah, that is one. The other one you talked about was puzzling places. And
Hmm.
that, it's sort of, okay, I'll do a 200-piece puzzle. It took me a couple hours to do it. Do I really want to do the 500-piece puzzle? And it's sort of like, yeah, I've got the hang of this. I'll get better at it. And it just gets tougher and tougher. But it is truly the example of what you can do with this spatial
Yeah.
platform that you can't do any other way.
Yeah, if you're new to Apple Vision Pro and you're a Marvel fan, What If is like almost a no-brainer. Like you have to. I think it's free, so yeah, it's definitely an experience worth consuming. And Puzzling Places was one of the first ones that I tried out on Apple Vision Pro, and a little bit of learning curve, but it was like really cool to see it sort of develop into, oh, that's not a flat puzzle.
Yeah.
Like that's a 3D sculpture, and it was it's really cool to get that experience. So that was one of the ones that I did enjoy.
I added a couple for today's episode. Real Puzzler, which is an app that will take your photos and will add a spatial quality to your photos and then break them up into whatever number of puzzle pieces you want. And then you can reconstruct the puzzle of your spatial picture on the table. It's a rather cool, fun little app to play with. Because I saw yours. Yeah.
I was just going to add that the really cool thing about puzzle apps in general is that, like, if you do it in real life, you have to like have a physical space and you have to leave the puzzle there. So if you walk away, the cat runs or the dog runs past it, messes up all the pieces. In spatial computing, that puzzle is portable. You can take it anywhere. And so I really like apps like that where you can take a physical experience, be able to replicate it, but have all the benefits of, I can just bring that around anywhere and I don't have to worry about it getting messed up. So
yeah, even with like Puzzling Places, you shut it down, you come back, that structure is still there for you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The other one I put in is been a cross-platform, but and I tried to avoid doing that, but it was too tempting. So it's like SimCity in a way, where you can build cityscapes. And I've heard some folks talking about how that's kind of a cool experience in terms of being able to do it. I haven't played with it yet, but I thought it would be worth mentioning in the show.
Yeah. I just love those, taking it spatially and just seeing it, build out in front of you. That's definitely a cool experience for sure.
And I actually had another, I think Eric's got one that he wants to talk about. Oh yeah, Beat Punch. Eric, why don't you talk about the Beat Punch game?
So Beat Punch was interesting because I had tried a couple different games before where the hand tracking needed to work to be able to intercept an object, and it was every game I tried was almost universally bad. Like you move your hand, the tracking didn't figure it out. Beat Punch, however they did it, whether the objects are bigger or they travel slower or whatever it is, the accuracy is really high. The animation on the hands, like you get gloves on your hand, you've got something on the front of your hand, you got something on the back of your hand, that it almost looks like you'd have like controls that at some point they could do something. The only issue with it is that if you're colorblind, the colors that they give you to work with, you can't distinguish between the two. And you're supposed to have a hand hit a specific color. I have a near like 80-90% failure rate because of the color problem. So I have to have somebody else stand there and I mirror to an iPad and then they tell me which color is coming in and then I can. So it takes more people for me to play. However, the hand eye tracking is good. So that gives me some encouragement that in the future, the hand eye tracking will be better for some games. I was beginning to think that we would have to have an accelerometer we held in our hands like the other systems.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be necessary. It seems like there is a way to do it. But this is the first game I've experienced where it worked really well.
That's good to hear. I have the meta game that involves the punching, but you're holding those devices in order to do it. You're holding those gimbals or whatever to be able to hit the mark all the time. I'll have to try that one out. Beat punch game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks cool. Looks cool.
Let me know if it works for you and if you get the colors to work.
Well, I'm a little color dumb too. I don't know if you could call me color blind, but people just call me color dumb, or maybe they're just calling me dumb. But I have a hard time. So my Irish heritage has screwed up my, what is it? Not rods and cones, whatever. In terms of color discernment,
Well, maybe they'll add a preference at some point.
they should do like shapes.
Well, you can take and in accessibility mode, you could turn on grayscale, and then you can tell.
Okay.
But I keep forgetting to turn it on to try games, so I'll have to go back. So I had one quick question. So in the notes, there was a comment that you don't use Mac Virtual Display, you just switch to the Mac and take off the and I was just curious if there was a reason for it or just to kind of switch things up, only because I use the Mac Virtual Display a lot. I use that combined with Universal Desktop and mirroring and screens, and I have like 4 or 5 different displays going and extra windows, and it just makes my life easier. But I was curious of what the limitation was where it's better to take off the headset and switch.
Oh, so to be clear, I love the virtual display. I think when I started it, I used it all the time too. And to connect, it's so easy to connect. And if you're a Mac user, to be able to use Figma or Xcode or some other things that don't really work well on Apple Vision Pro, it's great. I think at some point, maybe like a month in to using the Apple Vision Pro, I was like, well, I could connect it and keep the headset on. But what if I try to use the headset for as much as possible, work related, and then I know like the only stuff that I'll do is the stuff that I can't do on Apple Vision Pro. And so it's just been more of a mental thing where I just sort of separated it. And it's weird. Like I'll wear it in the morning, do it for as much work as possible. And then when I have to switch over, then I'll switch over to Mac. And I'll be honest, I don't really like the Mac as much as I used to. Not that I use the Apple Vision Pro with this, in this manner. So I only use Mac Display now if I have to look at something in Apple Vision Pro and the Mac Display at the same time. So for like debugging something or testing out an app. So, but otherwise, I try to keep it separate now, which is probably a minority. I'm sure that more people are like you, Eric, where it's great to have it, and it is great to have that virtual display. You can blow it up and have a monitor of any size. So it's a great feature. I just don't use it as much as I used to.
Okay, that's kind of interesting. I mean, I guess one of the reasons I find myself using it is I end up in buildings or temporary space where, especially mid-afternoon, the display isn't in front of a window and it's backlit. And if I use the Vision Pro, then I have a perfect environment. And I can turn the virtual environment up, and then I have no sun glare and nothing else. And because of the sun coming in, nobody wants that spot. Yeah. So I get a convenient spot, a nice chair, and I fix my environment.
Yeah, that's a great use case. And you had mentioned earlier about the privacy piece. If I'm working on something sensitive that is under NDA, opening up that laptop, no one's going to be able to see your screen. So it's great to work on that kind of stuff without feeling like someone's going to look over your shoulder or anything like that. So that is another great use case for having that virtual display on, especially in a public setting, for sure. I don't know if you want to get into it, but there's actually another use case related to that, which is in aviation, there's all these operations centers where you need to see a lot of data to be planning flights. And, so one of the experiences that I've worked on is, how do you do that for someone who's managing an operations center, whether it's for an airline or some other place where you need to look at all this data. And Apple Vision Pro is great for that because you can lay out the windows how you want it, and it's incredibly private. So no one can see some of that sensitive data, and you can bring it with you anywhere. So you don't have to go to the operations center of an airport to get this information. You can view this anywhere in the world as long as you're connected securely. So
that is a good idea.
That's very cool.
So there's a lot of use cases like that in the enterprise that we work on, and that's another one.
Do you get to play with anything in medical fields?
It's interesting that you bring that up. So last week, one of our coworkers actually participated and supported a surgery. And I can't talk too much about it, but it was an example. And there's companies like Stryker, and I know there's folks on LinkedIn that are really getting into medical. And that's another great use case for Apple Vision Pro in the enterprise for sure. It's really exciting to see the developments there.
Yeah, well, surgeons seem to be the one area that we're starting to see requests. A lot of the other areas, the management is not quite there yet, but the surgeons have a budget and the interest. So
right, and they do high value. They do high value work. So any technology advantage that makes them better surgeons. Yeah, that's a no brainer.
I think the general public is scared of that stuff when the news reports come out. But if you have to think of it as there's a whole lot of data that they can see without having to turn around and ask somebody about it. It can be right in their field of vision, and they can make decisions while they're doing whatever procedure they're doing. And I think that, if it was presented more like that, then, he's doing surgery through a headset, or he or she is doing it, it would give a better explanation where all this information is right in front of them. They don't have to get distracted by asking somebody else for it while they're doing it.
Absolutely. Yep. So again, that's just going to be experience. More people just have to experience it, what it's like, to wear Apple Vision Pro. And, it's just a matter of time for that.
Well, you have been so thoughtful and gracious as a guest. I love to hear how you talk about the device and how you've kind of opened up this whole background world of how the device is being embraced from enterprise standpoints, and folks like you who are doing the development for it. So, Nelson, we're grateful for joining us and telling us about your work and about Lextech and the kinds of things that won't show up necessarily in the App Store, but are really making the product Vision Pro important device for people in the workplace and from a productivity standpoint.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Well, I want to thank listeners for tuning in. We'd love to hear from our listeners. If you have any ideas or want to join us on an episode, email us at visionprofilespodcast@gmail.com. Our bumper music is Free Jazzy by Steve Combs, courtesy of the Free Music Archive. Learn more about us and the Vision Profile podcast at our website, visionprofiles.info. And there's all sorts of other available podcasts that you can find at thepodtalk.net. Spread the word to other visionaries. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.